Let's be honest, she has a kid, she can't commit the way this role requires. My manager Derek announced to the promotion committee, his voice carrying through the conference room door. I'd paused outside. Single mothers are too distracted, too unreliable, too focused on ballet recitals and pediatrician appointments to dedicate themselves to senior leadership. The HR director laughed, actually laughed, and added, "We need someone who can be available around the clock, not someone racing out the door at 5 p.m. for daycare pickup." But why did I quietly clean out my desk that Friday afternoon without filing a complaint, without confrontation, without a single word of protest? And why did the entire company receive a startling announcement first thing Monday morning? Following the acquisition by Meridian Capital Partners, please welcome your new CEO, effective immediately. My photograph loaded on every screen in the building. The conference room where Derek had dismissed me went silent, and I walked through the front doors, not as the overlooked project manager, but as the woman who now owned 67% of the company that had just decided I was too distracted to lead. I'd been planning the acquisition for 18 months. The job at Whitmore Technologies had never been about the salary or the title. It had been about access, understanding the company's operations, identifying its vulnerabilities, and positioning myself to acquire it when the moment was right. I'd built Meridian Capital Partners in my spare time. The hours after my daughter Sophia was asleep, the weekends when she visited her father, the early mornings before the world demanded my attention. The private equity firm had grown from a small fund to a $340 million operation, and Whitmore Technologies had been in my sights for 2 years. The company had potential. The leadership had problems. The combination was opportunity. My cover as a project manager had served multiple purposes. I needed to understand Whitmore's internal culture, its operational inefficiencies, its treatment of employees at various levels. The project management role gave me access without scrutiny. I was visible enough to observe everything, but invisible enough that executives like Derek never looked too closely. "You're overqualified for this position," HR had noted during my interview. "I'm looking for work-life balance," I'd responded. "My daughter is 6. I need flexibility more than challenge right now." They'd hired me immediately. A Harvard MBA willing to work for project manager wages because she had mommy priorities? They thought they'd found a bargain. They'd found their future owner. The 18 months at Whitmore had confirmed everything my preliminary research suggested. The company had strong technology, talented engineers, and valuable contracts. It also had management that actively suppressed its best people, promoted mediocrity, and treated entire categories of employees, particularly women, particularly parents, as second-class workers. Derek wasn't an anomaly. He was the culture. I'd documented everything. The discriminatory comments. The promotion patterns that consistently favored less qualified men over more qualified women. The informal policies that ensured working mothers never advanced past middle management. The documentation wasn't for a lawsuit. It was for transformation. The acquisition had been structured carefully. Whitmore's board had been eager to sell. The company's stagnation under current leadership had depressed stock prices, and my offer represented a 40% premium over market value. They'd accepted without understanding who was really buying. Meridian Capital Partners operated through a network of holding companies that made tracing ownership difficult. The board had negotiated with my representatives, reviewed my firm's impressive track record, and welcomed the financial partnership that would unlock shareholder value. They hadn't asked too many questions about the new CEO the acquisition agreement required them to accept. They hadn't connected Elena Martinez, project manager, with Elena Martinez, managing partner of Meridian Capital. The revelation would be educational. Monday morning arrived with appropriate drama. I'd dressed carefully, professional but not ostentatious, authoritative but approachable. The woman who walked through Whitmore's doors looked nothing like the harried project manager who'd cleaned out her desk 3 days earlier. The receptionist didn't recognize me at first. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for the all-hands meeting. I'm the new CEO." Her eyes widened. Wait, Elena? From project management." "The same, though my job responsibilities have changed somewhat." The all-hands meeting was held in the largest conference room. Employees packed the space, curious about the acquisition, nervous about what it meant for their jobs, uncertain about this new leadership they'd been told to welcome. I stood at the front, watching familiar faces register confusion as they recognized me. Derek sat in the third row, his expression cycling through disbelief, denial, and something approaching panic. The HR director, who had laughed at my expense, sat beside him, equally stricken. "Good morning," I began. "For those who don't know me, though some of you do, I'm Elena Martinez. I'm the founder and managing partner of Meridian Capital Partners, and as of this morning, your new CEO." Murmurs rippled through the room. "I've spent the last 18 months working at this company as a project manager. I've observed your operations, your culture, and your leadership up close. I've seen both what Whitmore does well and where it falls critically short." I clicked to a slide showing company performance metrics. "The technology here is excellent. The engineering teams are talented. The market opportunities are significant." I paused. "The leadership has been the problem. That changes today." The terminations happened immediately after the meeting. Derek was first. "You can't fire me," he protested in my new office, his former boss's office, now mine. "I've been here 12 years. I have a contract. Your contract includes termination for cause. Documented discrimination against protected classes constitutes cause." I slid a folder across the desk. "These are transcripts of comments you've made about female employees, single mothers, and working parents over the past 18 months. Comments I personally witnessed. Comments that created a hostile work environment and violated multiple federal employment laws. You were spying on me? I was working here. You just never noticed because you didn't consider project managers, or women, worth your attention. This is revenge. This is business. You're a liability. Your leadership philosophy has suppressed talent, driven away valuable employees, and created legal exposure. Removing you isn't revenge, it's basic operational competence." The HR director's termination followed. "I was just doing my job," she insisted. "Your job was to prevent discrimination, not participate in it. When Derek said single mothers couldn't commit to leadership roles, you laughed. When female employees filed complaints about unequal treatment, you discouraged them from pursuing formal processes. When promotion decisions consistently favored less qualified men, you signed off without question. I didn't make those decisions. You enabled them. That's arguably worse. You were supposed to be the safeguard, and instead you were the cover." She left without further argument. The restructuring announcement went company-wide that afternoon. Under previous leadership, Whitmore Technologies developed an informal policy of limiting advancement for working parents, particularly mothers. This policy was never written down because everyone understood it was discriminatory. It existed anyway because leadership believed they could get away with it. I looked directly at the camera recording the announcement. That policy ends today. Advancement at Whitmore will be based on performance, potential, and contribution. Family status is irrelevant. Parental responsibilities are not weaknesses. They're evidence of the ability to manage complex demands, which is exactly what leadership requires. I announced the new policies: flexible scheduling options, parental leave expansion, promotion criteria that would be transparent and documented. Some of you were passed over because of who you are rather than what you could do. Those decisions are being reviewed. If you were denied opportunities you deserved, that changes. The employee response was overwhelming. Emails flooded my inbox. Stories of being overlooked, dismissed, told that their family responsibilities made them unsuitable for advancement. The discrimination had been systemic. The correction would be equally comprehensive. The industry response was immediate and intense. Business publications covered the story. Private equity CEO works undercover, exposes discrimination before acquiring company. The narrative caught fire. A single mother who had been told she couldn't commit had secretly built an empire, acquired her critics, and transformed the organization that had dismissed her. Was this always the plan? A journalist asked during an interview. The plan was to acquire a company with potential and fix its problems. The personal experience of discrimination helped me understand exactly how deep those problems went. Some would call this revenge. Some would call it justice. I call it good business. Companies that discriminate don't just harm employees, they harm themselves. They suppress talent, limit innovation, and create legal liability. Fixing that isn't revenge. It's removing obstacles to success. Derek attempted legal action. His wrongful termination suit was dismissed quickly. The documentation I'd gathered was comprehensive, and his discriminatory statements were undeniable. He said those things in what he believed was a private meeting, his attorney argued. He said them in a professional setting to colleagues who could repeat them. There's no expectation of privacy in a workplace conference room. More importantly, the statements themselves constitute discrimination regardless of who heard them. The case was dropped after preliminary review. Derek took a job at a smaller company, his reputation significantly damaged by the public exposure of his management philosophy. The HR director fared worse. Her professional conduct became the subject of a broader investigation when former employees came forward with their own stories. She'd systematically discouraged discrimination complaints, provided cover for biased managers, and created a culture of impunity that had harmed dozens of careers. She never worked in HR again. Whitmore Technologies transformed over the following 2 years. The leadership restructuring opened pathways for talent that had been suppressed. Women who'd been told they couldn't advance were promoted based on demonstrated performance. Working parents who'd been marginalized found their contributions recognized. The business results followed. Revenue increased 34% in the first year. Employee retention improved dramatically. Innovation accelerated as people who'd been afraid to speak up found their voices valued. You actually were too distracted to commit to this role, Derek's replacement, a woman who'd been passed over 3 times under the old regime, told me during a strategy session. Too distracted by building an empire to notice you were being discriminated against. I noticed. I just responded differently than they expected. Sophia, now 8, visited the office regularly. She'd sit in my conference room doing homework while I conducted meetings, a visible reminder that professional excellence and parental presence weren't mutually exclusive. Mom, why do some people think you can't be good at your job and also be a mom? Because they've never tried to do both, so they assume it's impossible. And because believing it's impossible makes them feel better about not trying. That's dumb. It's limited. There's a difference. I smiled. But you're right that it's also kind of dumb. The company I'd acquired became a model for inclusive leadership. Business schools studied our transformation. HR departments adopted our policies. The story of the project manager who bought her company and fired her discriminatory bosses became shorthand for a particular kind of justice. But the real impact was quieter than the headlines suggested. It was the engineer who'd been told she was too emotional for management, now running a division. It was the analyst who'd been denied promotion for taking paternity leave, now a vice president. It was the dozens of employees who'd absorbed the message that their family responsibilities made them less valuable, now understanding that they'd been lied to. Derek reached out once, 2 years after his termination. I've had time to think, his email said. I was wrong. Not just about you, about everything. I built my management philosophy around assumptions that were cruel and ultimately incorrect. I'm trying to do better. I responded briefly. Growth is possible. I hope your efforts are genuine. I didn't offer him a job. Some bridges burned completely. But I appreciated the acknowledgement, however late. The moment I remember most clearly isn't the dramatic revelation or the terminations or the business transformation. It's a quiet evening in my office, Sophia asleep on the couch while I finished reviewing quarterly reports. The building was empty except for security. The screens that had displayed my photograph to the entire company now showed spreadsheets and projections. I'd built something. Not just a company, a proof of concept. Evidence that the excuses used to limit women and parents weren't facts but choices. Choices that benefited the people making them and harmed everyone else. Single mothers can't commit. I'd committed 18 months to an undercover operation while raising my daughter, building a private equity firm, and planning an acquisition. The commitment had been extraordinary. The dismissal had been ordinary. The same dismissal countless women faced every day. The difference was that I'd had resources to respond. Most didn't. Most had to absorb the discrimination and find other paths forward. That's why the transformation mattered more than the revenge narrative. Every policy change, every promotion criteria revision, every public statement about inclusive leadership. It was for the women who couldn't by their discriminatory employers. The women who had to live with the consequences of biased decisions. They deserved workplaces that valued their contributions. I could help build those workplaces. They said single mothers couldn't commit. They said I was too distracted, too unreliable, too focused on pediatrician appointments to deserve advancement. They laughed when they said it, confident in their assessment. They didn't know I was building an empire in my distracted hours. They didn't know the company they worked for would soon belong to me. Monday morning, their screens displayed my photograph under the words, "New CEO." The manager who dismissed me was terminated by noon. The HR director who laughed was gone by 3. And the company that decided single mothers couldn't lead discovered that one particular single mother had been leading all along. She'd just been doing it quietly, strategically, and with patience they couldn't imagine. They thought I was too distracted to commit. I was too committed to let their distractions stop me.